today I'm going to talk about process. So everything I brought today, it kind of goes through the gamut of 2003 to 2014 or something. And it's all about process, like good process versus bad process, why some work makes me cringe and other work is ugly and I love it, all that kind of stuff. I'm not giving a lecture, I just have index cards and a bag full of work to show. So I went to MCAD, and the way that we were taught to design is we get an assignment and then just be told, do it. There was no, even if your process was bad and unreliable, no one ever talked to you how you would fix your process. I never heard what the symptoms of bad work were. Saying you had creative block was quasi-acceptable, in that no one explained how to get out of creative block. So it was just assumed that was a natural thing, that people go through creative block. And as I talk about my stuff, I will explain that I don't think that's a natural thing. I think creative block is a symptom of a different problem. So this is his poster for a series of lectures. It was called the Fine Arts Forum. But basically the idea was there were 1, 2, 3 lectures throughout the spring of different fine artists. This is the most convoluted piece of graphic design. The only reason I can remember what it's about is because some of the metaphors and puns are so unbelievably obvious. So there's a tree in the background because someone did something with nature or the sky or something like that. There are logs because logs are related to trees. There are clouds because of that. This is brown because she works with clay. Just terrible, bizarre ideas. The only thing that worked out is that I cared so much about doing the thing that I was like committed to my bad ideas. So I would have bad ideas and I would just run to the edge with them. And then the way that this worked, and the reason it's sprayed over, is the same posters would be used the whole time. So lecture 1 was just this block here. There was nothing here and nothing here, just big empty spots. We would take all the posters down, do a spray paint stencil of more clouds over it, and then do the next lecture, spray paint over that. So this is what it looked like by the time you got to the 3rd lecture if no one had stolen the posters. I think there's 6 typefaces, maybe 7. And what's funny is like I don't look back on it and I think it's a good strategy. You don't have an idea, just pick a symbol for every single thing in the project. But it's like, how many times can you do that? It's such an exhausting, weird to be battling like, okay, this typeface means this, and this means this, and this means this. How are we going to tie them all together? It was thoroughly ridiculous. This is another project from around the same time. So what I did was I got in touch with this guy, John Weiss, who's a Los Angeles-based noise artist. And I said, I'm going to put out one of your records for my senior project. We'll do like an edition of 300, I'll design the packaging. When I did regular graphic design, it turned out like that, like total insanity. And then when I didn't even have like actual content, like it's static, chopped up, like there is no content, I really didn't have any idea what to do. Somewhere there's a book, I don't even think it's a notebook, it's just an actual book, and it is filled with photocopies of like chunks of that poster, weird drawings, fonts I liked, bits and pieces of photocopy glitch, and I had decided that what I would do is I would take my personal aesthetics, like what I gravitated towards, and I would somehow make like this design language based on that. So this crazy record cover is basically just remixes of remixes of remixes of all the stuff that was in this notebook. And on the one hand, it's cool because it does not look like anything you've seen before, or that's like where I would go with it. But on the other hand, it was this really intense, unpredictable process. Even the record covers, the way they worked is I had a 3-ring binder filled with this box basically, and I just put different stuff in it. When it was time to actually make the record, I just picked 2 of them and then said, let's make it a really muddy gray color palette. There was no sort of conceptual idea to it, except that I love muddy gray color palettes. I was like, okay, cool. Did those, we ended up with like a big stack of orders, like extra printing. So I decided to repackage those. And at this point, I had worked at Target. I didn't have time to kind of screw around with my crazy head on every project. One, because my boss constantly surprised me with, you're working till 9 tonight. So I never had time to do any work. And then two, I didn't have a tolerance for like spending a lot of time on stuff anymore. I'd like gotten to this point where I was so used to doing a million versions of everything at Target that then infected everything I did. And I kind of was able to stop being so conceptual in a good way. The other thing is like when I did that, I didn't have a sense of like packaging as like a narrative that could unfold and had all these surfaces. I pretty much just was like, okay, I can fold it in half and put it in the bag and it'd be nice. By the time I did this, my head had kind of changed about it, and I was thinking more about sort of plainer stuff. So we took the original package, I probably tracked down the color separations, and was like, let's make it bright and simple. Like I prefer immensely. And then you open it up, and it's got like this really nice, clean, kind of Swiss panel right here, all caps, accidents, grotesque, which I absolutely loved. Added this nice little numbering thing, and then my wife is a photographer, so I took one of her photos that just seemed kind of glitchy and just ran it as this giant screen print across, so it had like this nice kind of sculptural quality to it. I interned at Intermediate Arts for a while, and then I ended up working there. And intermediate was good because I didn't have these crazy time frames that would allow me, you know, like you're in school, it's completely reasonable where someone says, do this, come back in 3 weeks or something with something to show us. And an intermediate was like, do this, in a week we need to see a working version, and then you have a week to make revisions and get it printed. And what ended up happening is I would have the most intense bouts of creative block. And this one stands out to me. So this is this poster, this flyer, right, for the Encyclopedia of Hip Hop Evolution workshop series. So they would do these events, like a monthly event thing, and then they would do these workshops. What this is about is, it's like a photograph from a collaborative project that me and my wife did where we were photographing graffiti that had been painted over and they were trying to match the color to the original wall. And I liked the idea that there were all these sort of Mark Rothko paintings trying to cover up all this graffiti. And then this kind of hand-drawn type that was very big circa 2004, I think. Aside from the low contrast of it, I don't hate this thing. But when I look at it, all I can think about is the intense creative block I had. And the reason I had this really heavy creative block is that every time I got an assignment, I would think like, I would think about, oh, awesome, I'm so excited, I grew up in hip hop. This has got to be smart, it's got to be clever, it's got to be innovative, it has to be good, it has to encapsulate what hip hop is about, it can't have cliches. I would have all these ideas about what it could and couldn't do. And what I've sort of figured out in retrospect is that's the best way not to have any ideas. If you just decide, even if you decide this has to be good, I think that that alone is enough to derail your creative process, because now you have to judge every idea that comes in. I would do the thing, you know how people tell you if you have a creative block, go for a walk. Like, oh, go for a walk, or go to the museum, or take a shower, or go to the bookstore, whatever they say. I went for maybe 3 walks a day. Like I'd get in, I'd be so stressed out, I'd leave at 10:30 and go get a coffee. And I'd come back super stressed out, go to lunch, just take a walk. And on the walk, I'd come up with ideas and be like, no, come up with an idea, no, come up with an idea. I wouldn't capture any of the ideas. And finally, I'd be like, well, I'll just sit down and design this thing. I have no idea how I ever came to this idea, because all I remember is the fact that I was super judgmental about every idea that I had. And the reason, like part of the reason the color is so bad on this is that I pushed the deadline so far that I couldn't get a drawdown to sample whether the color would print on the paper really well. So I just had to kind of ride it out. Every project I did for the year that I was on staff there kind of fell into that same pattern. So like when I look at that, like when I look at any of this stuff, I don't think it looks bad. You know what I mean? Like I don't think it's bad design. But I think the process made me miserable, and I don't really buy that, like I don't come out of it thinking, oh, that was completely miserable, but at least I made this beautiful thing. I come out of it thinking, that was completely miserable, and now I have this weird artifact that reminds me of how miserable I was doing it. That's like totally how I view it, and I can see the compromises that like not having ideas done early enough didn't let me test out printing techniques. So then I end up with this thing that's really muddy that needs to grab attention. worked at Intermedia. I ran into the kind of wall of what I could achieve there, and so I went to work at Target. The dude that hired me at Target, I'm convinced that he only hired people who were a bad fit. So the entire team was people who didn't make any sense at Target, and he would hire us, I think with the idea that we'd be interesting and unpredictable, but all he would do is like berate us and make us miserable and try to mold us into what the whole rest of the department was like, which were people who wanted to work at Target so badly, and we were all people who were like, I don't know, it could be all right. Like that was kind of the attitude. And one of the things I learned at Target is how to work incredibly fast, because the first day I worked there, he, in between meetings, he's like, I need you to do Thanksgiving signing. Okay. He's like, here's some files. It's like on a CD-ROM or whatever, CDR. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, when do you want to see stuff? And he was like, the end of the day. He was so annoyed that I would ask, like, whether, like, it was almost like, he was like, when else would it be due? It's due today. And so I had to figure out this stuff they were working with and make these Thanksgiving signs. And what I sort of like ended up having to happen was, even a project with a healthy deadline, you didn't have time to work on it. You had time to do a million different versions. Eventually, what I realized was a lot of what I did, that super tricky stuff that I would do, was because my instinct was, I just want to make it all caps, one color in the upper left corner. I just wanted to be big and giant and be like, Encyclopedia of Hip Hop Evolution, done. But my mind was like, nah, it needs to be conceptual, and that's too easy, and that's like not postmodern enough, and all of this kind of stuff. And then when I went to Target, there was like, one, a lot of the times it was fully acceptable to have a red background, a bullseye pattern, and some giant all caps Helvetica. And so it was great. So it like kind of fed into where I needed to be. What ended up happening from that is that Target's design language is based on Swiss design from the 50s, basically. Pretty much every corporation where it's red and Helvetica, their stuff is based on the defaults of like 50s, 60s Swiss design. And so I'm like working there and I discover actual Swiss design, which was something I'd always kind of been interested in. Like, so this is an exhibition catalog. I think this is the first freelance project I ever did. It was right after finishing MCAD. And the idea behind it was like a reinterpretation of like super classic Swiss typography. So it's like all process colors. It uses this font Universe instead of Univers. So it looks like if you took Universe and photocopied it. So it's like really soft around the edges. It's still really pretty. And then it has this super simple grid, like these two boxes. The two boxes get broken up into two columns. And then there's this kind of crazy outlier thing. That each artist gets like a panel on this thing. The captions are brutally big, which I kind of like in retrospect. And then when there's no content, it just fills it in. So I think there's like another one of these big old empty boxes. Oh, there's one. And it was just this reinterpretation of like Swiss design. But because I was so sort of clever and like couldn't just do that, like I had to find an interesting font. And initially my crazy idea was like, are you guys familiar with rub down lettering? So it's like letraset, it's like on a sheet and you take a pen or a brayer and push down the type. It's like an old, like, they probably invented it in the 60s, but it was used like well into the 80s. And initially my idea was I would hand typeset the whole thing in Helvetica rub down lettering. So it would be total Swiss design, but made by hand and totally imperfect. And thank goodness I didn't do it, because it was like just another way to make the process overly tricky. Like, okay, well, it's not good enough just to make it clean with white backgrounds and negative space. Let's make it by hand, like a lunatic. So that, luckily, I stopped and did not do that. But that was also one of the first things where I made it, and I was like, this thing is weird, and like I genuinely like it, and I almost wished I had made it more traditional, more conservative. And like all through school, I had that the Emil Reuter typography book out of the library, like for 2 years straight, which is weird because I didn't learn anything from it. But I was really into Swiss design, but because it was old, I felt like it was off limits. So being at Target, where the whole language was based on Swiss design, and then it started to look closer at stuff like Experimental Jet Set. The designer Michael C. Place, who used to work at Designers Republic and has a studio called Build, where his stuff was like this kind of postmodern Swiss typography on crack. And there was a Peter Saville interview. So he's the guy that signed the Joy Division records. I heard an interview with him, and he was talking about literally that their first meeting with Factory Records, he had a copy of a Jan Sichel book, and he met with Tony Wilson, and he kind of opened the book up and said, I want to do this for you. And he literally like just would point to things, and they'd be like, okay. And they would make these pastiches of all of this older stuff. And like hearing that, just all of a sudden I was like, you know what? It's fine if I want to make stuff simple or old looking. Like I think I might do that for a while. So this is some stuff that came out of that period. These were like these CDRs of noise music that I was recording. And I just like, I didn't have much time, and I was basically trying to rebuild my portfolio in 2006, maybe 2007, something like that. I had this idea I was going to redo everything and just chuck it, like everything old. So I quickly made these 2 sleeves one night, and they're just all caps, accidents, grotesque, condensed, and then they're like 2 color screen prints on paper. I think this is around the time I did the other John Reese record, so I was starting to understand like layering. So that it's got these kind of cool cards that you pop off and like CD numbers on it, kind of like. Let's pop that back in there. So I made that, and I was like, oh man, this thing is awesome. So then I was like, maybe this is just like the new graphic language for the record label. So like the next thing was like I started doing like these posters based on it. They were like totally non-conceptual, other than that they were just what I was interested in at the moment with no sort of apologies. Like I wanted the stuff to be cold, icy, boring. It was like basically what I was interested in making at that time. And like embracing that, like graphic design was fun again, maybe for like the first time since the sophomore year of MCAT, because I had made it so not fun. I made it so hard, and then I went to Target, and they made it not fun. That going to Target was this sort of fantastic experience of, okay, it's okay if I work fast. It's actually, I like it when I work fast, and my new thing is let's get as much work done as possible instead of let's take each thing and make it this overly thought through kind of masterpiece. So this was like another piece from that period. It was a little exhibition handout for my friend John Vogt, who had a show at SUVAC. I think I might have thought, I don't know what I thought. Maybe I thought this should look like it came from the Walker, but I think it looks better than stuff from the Walker, so I could be wrong about that. I don't remember. But I do know that like there was no concept. I think I like started putting the type in, there were 2 columns of type, and I was like, cool, there'll be 2 row lines. At the same time I was doing that stuff, I had jokingly proposed that I was going to do these like series of paintings for the MCAT art sale that were going to be based on like old, really boring Swiss posters, because I like anything that's boring. Like if it's interesting, I'm not as excited, but like when you see Joseph Mueller Brockman paintings, and there's like super exciting, dynamic ones where he chops up the space, I hate those. I like the ones where it's one big box and then some type inside the box. And I have been listening to Dipset and G-Unit like 24 hours a day from the whole time I worked at Target. I brainwashed myself into only listening to New York crack rap. And it was really good because it undid all the weirdness that I had about like, because I thought I was like, everything I was doing was very informed by like punk rock. And only listen to people talking about making money, it was really good. So this series of posters was this bizarre mashup, Swiss typography, like motivational speaking maybe, and Dipset, though this is a Young Jeezy quote. And so there was a series of posters, and my whole goal was to make like the most boring example of Swiss typography that if you didn't read it, you might believe it was like a 1972 Joseph Mueller Brockman piece. So there were these series of 4 big posters. Apparently this is like an artist proof because it's supposed to be trimmed right there, but whatever. I'm trying to think. And one of the things I forgot about is I never did versions before. So like the record, the Encyclopedia of Hip Hop, that was the only version I did. And then if I updated it, I would do that. I never showed up and was like, let's do 3 versions of this. This was when I finally started doing versions, and what I would just do is always have 3 files open and make sure I was doing different things on each of them to see if I could, to try to do good work, because I wasn't convinced I was doing anything good. Yes?
Yeah, so I'm pretty curious about that thing that you just said. So you got a project, you got a design problem, you're literally working 3 different files simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so do you have distinctive visions for each one? Are you doing, subtle differences? Or they, I just maybe want to hear you talk about that.
Now they're even more subtle. So
Yeah.
a lot of times if I do a project, if I want to make a slight adjustment,
Yeah.
I'll duplicate that page in InDesign or Illustrator and make the adjustment there. And usually what I do is expand, and then afterwards go, oh, this is a mess. And then I start looking for, okay, there's this and this, which one's better? And I'll just kind of quickly try to get rid of them. Or I'll use a presentation deck and use that as an editing tool. So I'll place in a bunch of those options so that in the context of how the client sees it, they're not going to notice the differences between a lot of things. So if I show 10 versions where I'm like, I can't pick, they're just going to be annoyed that they have to swim through a sea of stuff. So then it's like, that even helps me sometimes keep from making a version that's unnecessary. Because you throw it in the deck and you're like, oh, well, it's fine. So at the time, usually it was like, if it was InDesign, it was multiple pages of the same thing, and if it was Illustrator, it was multiple files open. And I would just sort of explore little things. In the beginning, it was really subtle, because I literally didn't do versions up until I worked at Target, where it was expected that you did them.
Thanks, I love that. I mean, that's such a great, so liberating, because then each one becomes far less precious, and you can fool around, a lot more playful. You tend to forget a lot more too when you're working on something. You tend to, I think we often underestimate the value of just kind of like discarding something or forgetting. Picking it up again.
No, and I think now I don't even try. So what's the other thing I should point out? When I did these kind of projects like this thing, to do this, I largely had to think of it in my head and be able to imagine it. So I didn't sketch. And in general, I didn't explore. I would come up with an idea and then try to execute it. I now look back on that as total insanity, and I believe that the best thing to do is come up with loose ideas and then immediately try to figure them out in the software or on paper, but never to be like, okay, how would this work versus this versus this? Because the reality is that nothing works the way you think it's going to work, right? Once you pick the font, it's not as narrow as you thought, and you're not about to go make it narrower. So you respond to the reality of it, but I used to try to have an idea and then just do it. And I think that's part of the reason I would only do one thing. It would hurt so bad to come up with the one idea. This was this is the actual presentation deck to the Silk Factory for a bunch of graphics for an exhibition called Resonating Bodies, which was a group show of sculpture. I'm going to try not to get too caught up in the background, but there's a couple of things I will say. So I started working for the Silk Factory around 2010, I think. And speed-wise, I'd gotten much better as a designer. I was much more consistent, and I was a lot more confident in my abilities to deliver something. But I still very often could only get to 1 or 2 things. It's just I was a lot more confident in the 1 or 2 things I would show them. At one point I left. I don't remember why. I think it was too much work for no money, and I needed to actually try and make some money. So I left on good terms, and then over the course of a year and a half, they couldn't find anyone to consistently do the work that they needed done. So they'd find someone, they could do one mailer, and then they were gone. They'd find someone else who could do one mailer, and then they were gone. And one of the things that's really important, if you're running an institution, is not having to scramble to hire people every single time you need a project done. It's the reason they have staff, but they couldn't afford staff. They had a budget of like $3,000 for the year or something. So whoever worked for them was out of the goodness of their heart. So I called them up and said, I've heard that you can't find anyone stable. I want to come back and do everything for whatever reason. The joke is that we would get paid $1,500 for a flyer, and then we would pay $1,000 to design a book. So this was the second project when we came back. Oh, look at that. Okay, this is the kind of stuff we did before. So this exhibition was about the idea of transformation. So we made this type block up, gave it to our friend John. He made a rubbing. We scanned the rubbing in, printed it in gold. It was very kind of factual records influenced. Oh, and here's another one. I'm dodgy on this one. This was for another group show. It was called The Erasers. It is a bizarro, loose reference to Rauschenberg's Erase de Kooning drawing, where he got a drawing from Willem de Kooning and spent 3 months or something erasing it, and then put it in this gold frame. In my mind, that's what that is. This is when I had confidence but could not come up with a good idea to save my life still. This was like after 8 years of working. I still couldn't come up consistently with good ideas. I think a lot of people would tell you that's normal. I think that that's terrible and you don't want to do that. If you can't come up with good ideas consistently, there's a problem. Okay, so this is the actual presentation to them. The other thing is I didn't used to show any process. I would just be like, here's your thing, this is what it's about. Because I thought it was like a scam to show process to convince them that it was good, but I needed people to understand what we were up against. So this was a quote from the curator. So our research was a podcast interview with her. I liked this quote, but I specifically liked that sites for action was a thing I could imagine becoming a piece of graphic design. And then she had this other one, get in the way. So she specifically had arranged and curated the artists with the hopes that there would be tension between them, that their pieces would interfere with each other. So I thought that was kind of a neat idea. So these are just a couple pages of like notes. So what I would do is I would do my research. I would look for ideas. I would just write down everything that popped in my head. So if I read something about possible connections, I was like, interesting. And then I drew that terrible little sketch right down here that's like an impossible connection. And then I was like, puzzles, absences. And I thought about like on the tour posters, like at First Avenue, there'd be like a tour poster for Vince Staples, and there's a blank spot, and we'd write in, like April 17th. So it's like, that's kind of like a site for action. And I still don't know what this is, but I love it. And I liked Nightmare of Participation. The problem with Nightmare of Participation is it's not a visual idea. So what I used to try to do was take non-visual ideas and turn them into visual ideas. So here, I would look for ideas, and I'd go back with a highlighter, and I'd look for anything visual that was kind of interesting. But I was not super concerned if they were smart. And then I'd make this list of words, and then I would make this thing called a bed matrix. So along one axis, actually along both of them, I put all the words that I was going to use to design stuff. So that would mean that if, like in the top left corner, one option would just be the idea of messy clean. But then there would be an idea of messy clean plus site for action, messy clean plus bodies, messy clean plus type. And the process was to take one of those ideas and do pencil sketches for that idea until there was a good idea. So I know other people, they use this process to edit out bad ideas. So like they try something, it doesn't work, cool, don't do that one. I was using it as, you can't, then what I would do is like I'd have my terrible pencil sketch and I would show that to the client. And I'd show some references of like, here's a thing where you fill in blanks, here's the tour poster where I got this idea from. And then I would do another pencil sketch. Be like, this one is bodies, messy, clean, type only. So the idea was that it's one level of type you read from one distance and a different level you read from a closer distance. So that it's about that idea of the sculpture changes based on your relationship with it. So then I would do that, so on and so forth. This one is the worst one. I think it took 30 seconds. And it might have been because I saw this while I was looking for something else, and I was like, whoa, what if I just did icons for each artist's relationship with each other and the curator? And that's what this description is about. Okay, so 5 options. So previously we got 1 option, it was done, it took forever. If they rejected it, I would be angry. The curator picked this one, the worst sketch that I did at 2:45 in the morning and then immediately went to bed. She picked it without even having the presentation shown to her, she just had the PDF and read it. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this one. So I had this map of relationships, and we made this, which amazes me because it looks just like that, like down to the type arrangement. And what's interesting to me is like, in some ways it looks like other stuff we did. Like if I was to bring more work, you'd see a lot more Helvetica. But on the other hand, the actual content of the idea was a place we never would have gone. I never would have had this idea. It never occurred to me to do some sort of weird visualization for a project before. So it was like finally like that aesthetic part of the work had a foundation to it that was a lot better. This is a screen printed version of the actual poster. And so this thing down here is the key that helps you. So each of these is an artist, and then that's the curator. This key makes these functional. Like you can actually map out their relationships, besides the fact that they're a really nice, compelling visual anchor. This is another project we did with roughly the same process. So this is for an exhibition where a lot of the artists had their hand in the work in some way. My challenge, or one of the challenges I should say, was how can a graphic designer show their hand in the work? Because like everything is digital. So we showed lots of options based off a bed node diagram. This was the first project for the Soap Factory. We showed 11 different options that they could go with. They picked this one, which is, this is my screen, and it uses click tracking software as every time I worked on a poster, or the mailer, or social media graphics, or whatever. So like the big circles, I was probably responding to an email at that time, and it was just sitting there getting bigger. There's a giant circle where I was like on the phone with the printer. And it's just a composite of, I don't know, 2 months worth of work. And then it ended up with this sort of Swiss thing, because we were actually specifically interested in, one of my favorite things was like museum posters where there's just a big photo of the work and then like all that kind of informational stuff underneath it. This ended up doing that, but it could just have easily looked like a million other sort of aesthetics, but we both like Swiss typography. I think we can pass it off. Why not? It's a nice big poster. Let's see, any questions?